Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our first webinar. Our topic today is mental health, and our speaker is Sister Aliah Azmeh. She is the counselor of Muslim Family Services. We are a division of ICNA Relief USA. We're located in Detroit, and she'll be talking to you now.
Assalamu alaikum. Thanks, Tanjan. My name is Aliah, and today we're going to be talking about mental health in general. Mental health has been something that people have been talking about recently more often, and it's certainly something to take heed of and to learn more about, because it does affect the way that we see ourselves, the way we deal with society, and the way that we are able to contribute or not. So I did a PowerPoint. So what is mental health in general? I mean, people may say that the first thing that would come to your mind is someone who is crazy or is taking medication, or someone institutionalized, something more extreme like that. But mental health is actually, everybody has mental health. Every human being has some type of, a certain way of themselves. How do they deal with difficulties? How do they react when something angers them? How do they view the world, positively, negatively, and everything in between? Mental health is just the way that you emotionally and psychologically respond to yourself and the world around you. Your relationships, your communities in general. It affects the way we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. So mental health really starts from the beginning, really just when a baby starts to realize his world, just his environment around him, his parents, the way that he lives, it does affect that child's mental health, from babyhood to adulthood to death. Really, it's like a circle of life thing. So mental health, you can either have good mental health or negative or bad mental health, and obviously there's everything in between. So someone who has positive mental health, they realize their full potential. They're able to be successful in their life. Everybody defines success differently. Certainly, a lot of people think that success has everything to do with making a lot of money, or being, known by everybody in society, or happy. I mean, everybody defines success differently. But a person who does have positive mental health believes in themselves that they can achieve their goals. Like, it's something deep down in their heart, they believe it. They're able to overcome stressors in life. So, subhanAllah, we all know that life can throw many difficulties in our way. It could be anything, really, anything small to not finding your favorite meal at a restaurant, to bigger things like unemployment, or the like. And a person with positive mental health is able to overcome them in a more positive way, is able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, basically. They work productively. They don't view the world, and if they're working at the workplace or at school, they don't believe in, like, this is a competition. Like, I have to be better than everybody else. They always have this idea that it's about the journey, it's not about the end result. So the journey, am I learning? Am I growing? Am I getting the tools to be able to be a positive influence in the future if I fail this time, for example? They have this type of mentality. They don't have it that, like, I need to win this game, or I need to be the better person in this project, or the like. I mean, they are positive, and they're steered towards the journey and not the end result. They make positive contributions to their community. So they're generous people. They're generous from their heart. So that's, in general, just of positive mental health. People who have negative mental health, they have low self-esteem. And, we can go on and on about low self-esteem. Low self-esteem is basically, it affects all sectors of a person's life, like literally. A person with low self-esteem usually sees themselves in a negative light. It's this small seed that's planted in them from childhood that, once that person grows older and older and, the more experiences in life, and every choice that they make, it usually affects them in a negative way. So low self-esteem, they could feel like they are not worthy of whatever good comes to them. They don't, if they have a goal, they second guess themselves often. If they're disagreeing with someone in a conversation, they could believe that that person is out to get them, or they don't play. They don't have good. They're not good sports, really. They feel that the people in the world around them, they don't want them to prosper, basically. So, I mean, low self-esteem, really, we can go on and on about it. But usually a person with negative mental health has low self-esteem. They're not able to overcome life stressors adequately. So basically it could be like, they have like a hissy fit if they don't find like something small, like they don't find their favorite tea at a restaurant. Or if they, lose their job, it could be that they come back home and they make fights with their family and, run off the other side of the country. I mean, it could be, a lot of us have many examples of how, they relate with someone, something difficult has happened to them and they just went downhill. They're distrustful of others and themselves. So again, it ties highly with low self-esteem. They don't trust anyone, or most people. They don't trust themselves even. If they take a task, then they don't believe that they would do it adequately, or they try to run away from it. So they don't realize their full potential. They're too scared to face it. And difficulty maintaining relationships. And this is interesting one. And I tell a lot of my clients who are, with relationship counseling, marriage counseling, a lot of times it's nice, it's very helpful question to ask a potential spouse is if they've had a long-term friendship. Because usually good friends make good spouses, because a relationship is about giving and taking, and forgiving, overcoming disagreements and different expectations. And someone who has a good relationship with a friend does have the qualities to be a good spouse. And someone with negative mental health may need more help with that. So what is mental illness? I mean, mental health, we talked about, everyone has mental health, but not everyone has a mental illness. Mental illness is basically mental health is so negative to a point that it affects your functioning. So affecting your functioning, meaning that you're having trouble doing your daily activities. You're having trouble getting up and going to work, or going to school, or maintaining a good friendship, or you're not sleeping well, or you're eating too much or too little. Those sorts of things. Mental illness is certainly, a huge, like, not everyone, you can't simplify it with just like a few disorders, and you can't just simplify it with depression. Mental illness is vast, and there are many different kinds, and it's worth looking into and getting an idea. What are the causes of mental illness? Life experiences such as trauma or history of abuse. Trauma certainly, it could be as extensive as war and seeing death and dying all around you and misery. And it could be living in poverty, living in distressed circumstances. It could be living in an abusive household, or any type of abuse, physical, verbal, emotional. And the younger you're exposed to it for long periods of time, the more likely it will affect you in the long run. Another causes are biological factors such as genes or chemical imbalances in your brain. We're going to talk a little more about it later. And family history, so genetics. Like many diseases, like physical diseases, mental illnesses are also inherited genetically. So types of mental illnesses, they're, in general, these are like the groups. Mood disorders such as depression, bipolar, anxiety disorders. So anxiety meaning, irritability, heart racing, feeling like you're doomed. It's more short term. Panic attacks. There's eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorders. We hear a lot about them with children, but adults also can be affected by this disorder. There's psychotic disorders, so people with schizophrenia, or people that have visual or auditory hallucinations. So people that may hear or see things that aren't there. Substance abuse disorders, we know about addiction and others. Co-occurring mental health substance abuse. So a lot of times people who are addicted to alcohol or any other substance may suffer from depression or anxiety at the same time. We have personality disorders. So this is like another subgroup of people that have a disorder in their personality. So it's the way that they view themselves in society. That's how you see it. If someone specifically has a personality disorder, usually they're the hardest ones to overcome because that person is living in their own world, basically. Suicidal behavior. So things can get so bad to the point that that person believes that they're better off dead. So major depression is the disorder that everyone usually connects with mental health. If someone usually hears the word mental health, they think of depression right away. And it is very common. It encompasses many other mental illnesses, and it has different levels. So certainly people can be high functioning and depressed, and there are people that are so low functioning and depressed as well, to the point that they can't get out of bed in the morning. So there's everything in between. So it's a good way to kind of get yourselves acquainted with mental illness by talking about depression. It's not just something, you have someone who's depressed isn't someone who's just sad. It's more than just being sad. It is an actual chemical imbalance in your brain. Like if you have a scan, comparing a person who's not depressed with a person who is depressed, their brains look different. So that's something really important to know, that it's not just like if you see someone who is excessively sad, is not eating well or not sleeping well for long periods of time, you can't just tell them, oh, get up, this world is, you're being a baby. It doesn't work that way. That person usually is suffering from much more than you think. So again, factors that contribute to the cause of depression includes genetics. So parents, grandparents, or anyone usually in the family line, it can be inherited. Changes in hormone levels. So we can see that with women after they give birth. with postpartum depression, there's usually a hormone imbalance. And a lot of times that woman is feeling overwhelmed, and she could get postpartum depression. I think it's 10 to 15% of women who give birth have postpartum depression. Certain medical conditions, stress over long periods of time, or difficult life circumstances, again, living in poverty, living in war, living in uncertainty, unstable environments. Scientists believe that people who are depressed have a smaller hippocampus. So as you see in the picture, the hippocampus is really in charge of the sensory and the memory of the human being. And there's receptors, or like the neurotransmitters, or it's called serotonin. Serotonin is usually in charge of moving information from one part of the brain to the other. And what they have found is that people with depression, they have low amount of serotonin in the brain, and they have a small hippocampus. So, and a lot of researchers also have found that when they compare depressed people with non-depressed people, and they measure stress, the more a person is stressed out, like they feel constant stress day after day after day, the more likely that their brain produces something called a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol, subhanAllah, they say that the more cortisol the person has, the more likely that person gets depressed. So this is like a very strong theory that researchers have found that may contribute to the cause of depression. So examples of symptoms: sadness, fearfulness, feeling tired, lack of motivation, addictions, physical violence, someone hitting and breaking things, feeling shame, guilt, low self-esteem, mood swings, loss of interest in pleasurable activities. That's a big one. Constant fighting and arguing, cutting and burning. So we see that a lot with the teenagers, younger people. They might feel so, it's not necessarily a suicide attempt. It's just that they feel so sad and stressed out that they feel numb. So cutting makes them feel again. A lot of our clients have mentioned that, and it's common in general with the younger group of people. Feeling hopeless or helpless. There are many symptoms, and it's important to know that people who, all of us, any of us can feel, can have some of these symptoms at any given time, but it doesn't mean that we suffer from mental illness. It's just when these happen in excess and in long periods of time, meaning more than, the clinical definition of depression is, I think you need 5 or 6 of these for more than 2 weeks at a time, like continuously. So, and with no breaks in between. So it's more, as you can see, it's more intense than just feeling sad for a day or two and then, feeling a little better. It's more than that. So getting help, a lot of times when we think of mental illness, with a physical illness, right away you go to the doctor, you go to the ER or the urgent care or your primary care physician, like, oh, I have the flu or my back is hurting me. It's tangible, you can see it, you can feel it, and there are doctors, like medical doctors, that are known to treat it. Now with mental illness, it's something that you can't really put your hand on. You can't grab it. It's just something you feel. And it's fluid. It's not exact. It's kind of hard to explain. So the treatments are a little different with than just going to a doctor. usually the first type of treatment is counseling or therapy. By the way, they are the same, they mean the same thing, and they're used interchangeably. So someone who is feeling depressed for a long period of time, usually we tell them it's a good idea to go for therapy, to see a therapist. And a therapist is someone who usually has a master's degree in either psychology, social work, counseling, marriage and family therapy, someone who is trained to be able to talk to that person. And through talking is basically talk therapy. That's what, we say. That person is able to see their full potential. That person is able to make their own goals, and with the guidance of a professional, able to overcome the difficulties. It's a long-term relationship. It doesn't, you don't go just a few times and you're cured. It's usually at least 6 months to a year, at least. And even it varies. Maybe once a week you see the therapist, maybe twice a month. It really depends on each person. A person goes to a therapist, and that person, it's a close relationship, but they're not their friend per se. Like, they don't see them outside, they don't go out with them, they don't have dinner with them. That person it's a purely professional relationship, but that therapist is trained to help that person see themselves as worthy and see themselves as being able to become independent and pinpoint the causes of their problems and overcome them. So that's really number one. And it is a very effective type of treatment if the client, if the person seeking therapy is serious about it. So we do see a lot of progress with that. Now, a lot of times, therapy by itself doesn't work by itself, again, because of maybe the chemical imbalances in the brain is too extreme, or that person is experiencing symptoms that are too aggressive or too strong. So that's when the medications come to play. And there are some medications for, like different types of medications for mental illnesses. And rehabilitative services, that's something more intense than therapy. It's a lot of times that person goes to like a hospital type of setting, and a complete change of your environment. So you're not at your house, you're in this rehab place to help you overcome, for example, addictions or other types of mental illnesses that are kind of debilitating. Recovery is built on, and this is really important for the person seeking treatment, taking care of one's health. Now, when I talk about health, this is the physical aspect of it. So eating right, having enough sleep, being physically active, treating your medical conditions, having a stable home environment. So making sure that your house is not full of conflict and arguments and toxic people. It's about finding solutions and having a real home, like a place of refuge, living with a purpose. And this is really important. A lot of us don't really stop and think, what is the purpose of me doing X, Y, and Z? Is what I'm doing going to be good for myself and for the community? Having meaning in your life is enriching, and it gives you the force to move forward. And having strong ties to community. So having good friends, positive community members, people that you can relate to and share your life with and your experiences with. That's really as well another big factor to helping a person overcome mental illness. Now, attitudes towards mental health, as we no, as Muslims and even non-Muslims in American society, generally it's bad. Generally, people view mental illness negatively, and and really that's because a lot of people don't know what it is in general, like specifically what it is. They have an idea, but they don't know how people that are mentally ill deal with their issues and what do they look like. I mean, a lot of times people think of a person who's mentally ill as maybe violent, not in their right mind, someone who's not all there, and that's really far from the truth. Um, and especially in the Muslim community, we have a big stigma related to mental illness, and stigma, it comes from incorrect or negative beliefs about a certain group of people. So certainly we are stigmatized in American society now, subhanAllah. And, many people are stigmatized. Mentally ill people and mental illness in general is something looked down upon and looked on as negative and bad, and we don't want to talk about it. And someone who is facing a mental illness doesn't want to talk about it either, especially not in public. Now it's unfortunate because really everyone has mental health, as I mentioned earlier, and a lot of people have mental illnesses. 1 in 5 people, I think, have had a mental illness in the US at any given time. It's a fairly high number, and we don't talk about it adequately. We don't talk about it enough. And people who are suffering from any mental illness, they're reluctant to talk about it, and that creates a problem for society in general. Because communities that prosper, that actually succeed and they reach their goals, or they're good, they contribute positively in society, are people that have good mental health. So mental health isn't only that person and how their genetic makeup. It's also society. It's also relationships. It's also how we view others and see others. It's a social problem as well. It's not only a personal issue. Unaddressed issues can have a negative influence on homelessness, poverty, employment, safety, and the local economy. Minorities, as I mentioned earlier, the Muslim community, any other racial or ethnic minority, in any given country, they're more likely to suffer greater mental health issues than the rest of the population, because right away they are not looked upon as equal to the majority, so that person feels inadequate, and that has a negative effect on a person's mental health in the long run. Faith communities can play a huge role. So a lot of times a person may go to their church or their temple, and for us it's about going to the masjid, and it would really be a huge asset if a masjid accommodated people, all people, and created a safe environment for everyone to talk and discuss issues and feel welcome. Because the community is basically at the heart of the Muslim community. It's where the source of all the education and the social outlets are. And having a good foundation at a masjid, or having maybe a youth counselor or trained imams in mental health could really be a good asset to a community, to help the community members feel that they can contribute and that they are good people and they are worthy. So we talk about young people, and young people are usually the highest risk for mental illness. The earlier a child learns how to adequately deal with difficulties, the more likely he or she will have positive mental health. So it's kind of like, as I mentioned earlier, if, a child was abused at an early age, or a victim of war and poverty, they are more at risk of getting a mental illness, as they grow older. Because the earliest interactions are really what affect a person in the long run, and it's how their early experiences help them shape how they view the world. So if the early experiences are bad, then they're going to see the world through that lens. So the earlier you tackle mental illness, really, it's the better. You would be giving that child, a huge service if any kind of behavioral issues are tackled from the beginning. Usually behavioral issues are a lack of, attention and care and love to that child at an early age. Usually, not always. 50% of adult mental health problems begin before 14 years of age, and 75% begin before age 24. So we see that really prevention of mental illness starts from basically infancy, toddlerhood. The earlier, the better. And really, it's very simple. Prevention can be very simple. For example, if that child has a good family, it can start from only the mom and the dad. If the mom and the dad had created a safe and peaceful household and had a good relationship with their children, it could reverse or stop a mental illness from occurring. And it could really help that child overcome difficulties, because their foundation, which are their parents, gave them a strong foundation. We're talking about the emotional, mental foundation. And really, it's subhanAllah, it's so vital how the parents have such a huge impact on society, because really their children are the future. And if they invest well in their children, then they're investing in society in the long run. So taking action as a community, as a Muslim community, how can we start talking about this? How can we prevent mental illnesses? How can we engage everyone in these types of conversations? I mean, number one is community education, getting speakers who are qualified to talk about it, having imams get trained in mental health awareness, and talk about it during Friday prayer or lecture or any halaqas, anything. Just have the conversation and start it, and have people talk about it. And the more people talk about it, hopefully the less stigmatized it'll be, and the more people will understand what it is really, and not what they think it is. Provide a safe space for young people. And again, just as mentioned before, the younger you start, the better. And the young people in this community, or any community, from I think it's 12 years old and onward, they start thinking about who they are and how do they fit in this world, in this society. And that's when they start making judgments and moral judgments, and start experimenting with different things, different ideas. So that's really a huge, like a really big opportunity for, Masajid to engage these children and, accommodate them no matter what they are, like no matter how they act, because that's really their place of refuge. If we want them to grow into strong people, strong Muslims, people with, high self-esteem, Masajid would have to invest in their young people. And certainly start making alliances with other communities and agencies, other Muslim communities, other agencies, any type of agency that, you know, contributes positively to society. Contributing, being generous is someone who has high self-esteem or positive mental health. So, you know, teaching our children to, you know, help the homeless, or go to a soup kitchen, or do a community garden, or any other type of volunteer work is something as well as a Muslim community to look into, to help these children become strong individuals when they get older. And a lot of this presentation did come from the U.S. Department of Human Services website. It is very rich in good information and resources, so I would highly recommend people go there and check it out. Here's another list, and some additional lists as well. Nasiha.org is a Muslim website, and Stones to Bridges is also Muslim. And alhamdulillah, now the Muslim American community is, you know, looking more into investing in mental health, and there are a lot more mental health Muslim professionals nowadays. And alhamdulillah, that means that there are opportunities for, you know, our community to get educated and move forward in this arena. Thank you very much. And just let us know if you have any questions through email.